thankful for the support of these. Genesis chapter 8. It just says, and God remembered Noah. And God remembered Noah. You may take your seats in the presence of the Lord. I want to preach to you from this morning, from this text. God has not forgotten about you. God has not forgotten about you. Whenever we read the story of Noah, our thoughts are always consumed with the wickedness of humanity and Noah's preoccupation with building an ark. Noah was building an ark, Dr. Stewart, although it had never rained. You understand that the depravity of man had caused God to repent of his creation. And so God tells Noah to build this ark because he's going to destroy mankind. In chapter 6, verse 7, it says, and the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. Noah preached 120 years that it was going to rain, giving the people a chance to repent, but they refused. Nobody rededicated themselves. 120 years of preaching, it's going to rain. God is going to rain down judgment, and nobody changed. Nobody stopped their wicked ways. Genesis chapter 7, verse 23 tells us that on the selfsame day that Noah and his family went into the ark, every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven. Everything was destroyed, just as God said, on the selfsame day that Noah and his family went into the ark. In this narrative, we see the wickedness of humanity and the punishment by God of the wicked. But there's also another story. That story is not of God's judgment, but of God's faithfulness. We cannot escape the reality that these people died in this flood. We cannot escape the reality that man had to endure the consequences of his sin no more than we can escape the reality of our day. The Bible says that the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. The wages, the payment for sin is still death. And we cannot get away from those consequences. We cannot get away, be in denial of the fact that when we go against God, when we don't obey, when we don't heed his voice, there is a consequence. But what we see in this story is not just the judgment of God against the wickedness, but we see the faithfulness of God for those who obey him, for those who trust in him. In this relationship between God and Noah, we see God's provision not only for Noah, but we see it for humanity. Chapter 6, verse 8 says, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And I want to tell somebody this morning that that's what these 5 words that we read in our opening scripture, that's what they remind us of, is that just as God deals with the wicked, he also delivers the righteous. Y'all, Noah was a righteous man. He was a preacher of righteousness. He wasn't perfect, but he tried to live unto the Lord. He tried to do what God told him to do. And not only did he preach it, he lived it, he modeled it in front of his family. And the Bible says, and Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And I came to tell somebody this morning that just as God addresses those who disobey, just as God deals with those who rebel, and he deals with those who go on their way and turn to wickedness, God is faithful. He's faithful to the committed. He's faithful to the obedient. I don't hear y'all saying nothing. Psalms 18:25 says, to the faithful, God will show himself faithful. Do I have any faithful folk up in here? I know we're living in a wicked culture. I know we're living in evil times, but are there any faithful folk up in the house? I know folk have turned away from God. I know folk don't think that church is important anymore. I know folk are out to brunch instead of watching this stream. But do I have any folk that are called themselves faithful today? They said, Pastor Linda, I'm still here. I don't care what's popular in the culture. I don't care what everybody else is doing. I'm still faithful. When you read the last verse in chapter 7, before we get to our text verse chapter 8, it says the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. But Noah's life doesn't end at the end of chapter 7. I'm trying to tell somebody something. There was a chapter 8. Somebody said chapter 8. It says, and God remembered Noah. That's the message for the faithful this morning. That's what the message is for those who will continue to be obedient despite what the world is doing. You need to know that after your chapter 7, there is a chapter 8. No matter what is happening in your life, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the foolishness that's around you, you need to know that chapter 7 is not the end of your story. I came this morning to preach to somebody who feels like God has forgotten them. I don't know who I'm talking to this morning. Whether you're streaming, sitting in your kitchen, in your living room, at work, in this audience, somebody this morning needs this word of encouragement. Because you've been faithful in some places and you don't feel like you've gotten your just reward. You've been faithful in some places and it feels like God has left you sitting by the wayside. But Noah reminds us in this story, in this narrative, that God does not forget the righteous. God does not forget those who are obedient to his name. Am I talking to anybody up in here? Maybe I'm just talking to myself, encouraging myself, because sometimes it seems like with all the living right that you do, other folk, come on, get blessed. Other folk get favored. Other folk get the doors that are open and the opportunities given. But the text says, God remembered Noah. And is there anybody in here that said, if God remembered Noah, I'm encouraged this morning that he's going to remember me? I don't hear y'all saying nothing. I need you to say it until you believe it. If God remembered Noah, then surely he's going to remember me. As I'm being faithful to my family, as I'm being faithful to my church, God will remember me. God keeps his promises. That's what this text is all about. God keeps his promises to those who are faithful. He shows himself faithful. David said it this way, I've never seen the righteous forsaken. I wish I had some righteous folk up in here. Or his seed beg bread. David said, I've been through some things, but I've never seen the righteous be forgotten about God. I've never seen the righteous being left holding the bag by God. God always comes through for the righteous. Hallelujah in this house. I don't know who I'm talking to this morning, but whoever you are, feeling as if God has missed you this morning, the text says, God remembered Noah. That word remembered in the text doesn't really mean that God forgot Noah. It means that God was mindful of Noah. Somebody say mindful. In other words, God turned his attention to Noah. He attended Noah. And the truth is, y'all, there's never a time when God accidentally or neglectfully puts us out of his mind. 1 Peter 3:12 says, for the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears attend to their prayers. Yet there are times that while God is watching us, he's working on something else. Understand that God never forgot about Noah. However, his priority, somebody say priority, was fulfilling his purpose, which was a flood to wipe out the wickedness of humanity. Here is what we have to understand about God. His purpose purpose is always his priority. That's what the disciples didn't get about Jesus. To them, they wanted Jesus to overthrow the Roman government and take over. That was their agenda. They thought that Calvary was about what they were going to do in the present culture as it relates to government and the change that was going to be made with who was in power. But Jesus had to keep reminding them that Calvary was not about them individually, but Calvary was about humanity as a whole. And Calvary trumped their personal agendas as disciples. Calvary superseded what they wanted him to do. Come here and let me talk to you. I know that this is going to be a shock to somebody's system. I know that this is going to cause somebody to clutch your pearls. But you need to understand that sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes God's purpose all the time will take over. His priority will take over your plans, your goals, your comfort. Am I talking to anybody up in here? You need to understand that although God loves you and although God's paying attention to you, although God is listening to you, his purpose takes priority. It trumps whatever you think ought to be happening in your life right now. I know somebody is listening to me and you're also hearing your biological time clock, but God says my purpose trumps whatever you think is your priority. Somebody this morning, you're at that age where you think that life ought to be happening a particular way. You think that you ought to have some things acquired by now, retirement on the way, and you think life ought to be going a certain way, but God's purpose trumps your plans. And sometimes, ask me, how I know? Sometimes you got to stick a pin in your stuff. Last year, this time, I had to stick a pin in all of my preaching engagements. I had to stick a pin. I know it was COVID, but I was still getting invitations virtually, but I had to stick a pin in it. Last year, this time, I had other goals and plans, things that I thought I wanted to accomplish while we were in that virtual platform, things that I would get a chance to do, Dr. Stewart, that would push me ahead whenever the virus was over. But God's purpose trumped my plans, and I had to stick a pin in it. Who am I talking to this morning that God says stick a pin right here? Put what you want on the back burner because I got a greater purpose than what you can see. Psalms 40, David says, I waited patiently. Come on the Lord, and he inclined to me and heard my cry. He also brought me up out of the horrible pits. Look at somebody and tell them sometimes you got to wait. And the reality of this text is Noah's relationship to God protected him from the flood, but it didn't prevent him from having to endure the forces of the waves, the discomfort of the ark, and the uncertainty of when he would reach dry ground. And Noah would have to wait. I wish somebody would say wait. He would have to wait in the inconvenience and the turbulence in the ark on the sea of water until God brought forth his individual deliverance. And that's what's at issue this morning. Waiting. Anybody in here waiting on something? Waiting on God to deliver? Waiting on God to change some things? Waiting on things to turn around? It's in the waiting that we struggle. To wait means to stay where one is or delay action until a particular time or until something else happens. But I want to add to that, because waiting on God is not existing in a passive, dormant state of being. Doing nothing as if you're waiting on a bus to come at a bus stop is not waiting on God. Come on, waiting on God is not equal to sitting in a hotel lobby or sitting in the living room of your home waiting for an Uber driver to come to take you to your destination. When you're in a season of waiting, one writer said it's to go forth in discharge of duty while being tolerant of the delays. I don't think you got that. Let me say it one more time. To wait on God As one writer says, is to go forth in the discharge of duty while being tolerant of the delays. Just in case you're taking notes this morning, I want to give you one note that you can take home with you. Waiting is remaining committed to your present assignment while looking to your future deliverance. Waiting is being committed to your present assignment while looking forward to your future deliverance. Understand that Noah was given an assignment by God. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 20, the Bible says that he was to take 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moved along the ground. He said he's going to come to you, and Noah, you are to keep him alive. Somebody said that was his assignment. Being in this ark, taking these animals in, was not a pleasure trip. Noah was not on a cruise ship. He had the responsibility of working in this ark. He was working to do what? To keep the animals alive. And Noah had to work his assignment until God changed his situation. Understand, there was no concierge. There was no waiters. There was no housekeeping staff. It was just Noah and his family. Keeping these animals, 2 of every kind of species that existed during that time, which meant then that if he was the keeper, the attendee, the housekeeper, the waiter, it meant that he had to feed the animals. I'm talking about being committed to your assignment. Noah had to feed the animals every day. And Dr. Stewart, he had to clean up their waste. Come on, talk to me. After they had eaten and relieved themselves, it was Noah's job to clean up after the animals. There was no automatic disposable waste system, no garbage truck to come by and pick up the waste. He had to do it himself. I said Noah had to work. Noah had to be committed to his assignment. Noah had the responsibility of not just feeding the animals, but keeping the predator animals from the prey animals. Hallelujah. I'm talking to somebody now. Noah had to mediate what was going on that ark. He had to hold down the peace and hold things together. Noah is working in a stinky, noisy, smelly situation. He's having to navigate the chaos of the lions roaring and the hyenas laughing and the dogs barking and the cats meowing while trusting God that sooner or later his condition was going to change. Can I talk to you for a moment? Life can be just like that. While you're waiting on God, you got to work in some inconvenient, in some noisy, smelly situations. Am I talking to anybody up in here? I wish I had somebody up in here that said, Pastor Linda, I'm in a difficult situation, but I'm trying to be faithful to my assignment. Somebody in here, you're doing the best that you can. Somebody that's watching on stream, you're doing the best that you can to navigate the chaos of your life. Mediating in the drama that's around you. But your word today is to stay committed even in the chaos. That's a word for somebody up in here. Stay committed in the chaos. Stay committed in COVID. Stay committed with people who are arguing over wearing a mask and not wearing a mask. Stay committed over a politicized agenda of a medical condition. Somebody say, I got to stay committed in the chaos. You got to do what you got to do. It may be a job that you don't like. Stay committed. It may be an education that you don't feel as if it's going to profit you anything. Stay committed. It may be working in ministry that you feel like somebody else ought to be doing. Stay committed. It may be a class that you're taking, young people, that's too hard. You got to do what you got to do in this season. That's what I'm really trying to tell somebody. You got to do what you got to do. Bible says don't be weary in well-doing. Who am I talking to? For in due season, you gonna reap if you faint not. Here's what I want you to understand, is that what you are doing is an investment in the next season of your life. Check out the text. God told Noah in chapter 6, verse 19, to keep the animals alive. Somebody say, I'm trying to keep these animals alive. animals to repopulate the earth. But he wasn't going to just repopulate the animals for the sake or the ongoing of the animal kingdom, but also after the flood, God would give man the animals as a resource for food. Prior to this, humanity had only been herbivores. We had only been vegetable eaters. But when Noah would come off this ark, God was going to allow man to be omnivores, meat and vegetable eaters. So understand that Noah feeding the animals was going to feed him when he got off the ark. I'm trying to help somebody up in here. So while the responsibility was unpleasant, it was not unprofitable. That's what I'm just trying to tell somebody who's dealing with some animals this morning, who's living out some chaos, and you're doing your best to stay faithful to the assignment. While it is unpleasant, it's not going to be unprofitable. We plant in one season, and we reap in another season. And Noah had to do his work to keep the animals alive, because in keeping the animals alive, they were going to be the self-same animals that he would eat. Y'all saying nothing? Look at somebody and tell them, I'm investing in this season so I can eat in the next season. Listen, look at somebody and tell them, it ain't that I like animals so much. It ain't that I like dealing with these cows and dogs that I'm dealing with. It's just that I plan to eat in the next season. I don't hear nobody saying nothing. Look at somebody and tell them, this is my investment. My investment in my hard-headed children. My investment in my marriage that's on the rocks. It's my investment in the next season because I plan to eat. Am I talking to anybody that say, I plan to eat? I'm not going to live in this season and die in the next season of starvation. I plan to eat. So I'm going to do what I got to do. I'm going to work what I got to work. A job that's beneath my potential, I'm going to still work it because I'm investing in my next season. Giving up my time to myself and going to school, I'm working my next season. That's what the prophet Elijah told that widow woman who thought she was about to die. He said, what do you have in your house? She was in a season where she was about to starve to death, but she had a little oil. Come on, and she had a little jar of flour, and she gave it to the prophet, and instead of dying, she was able to eat for the next 3 years. I'm trying to talk to somebody up in here. You all right? That whatever you're doing for the Lord, it's a seed sown into your next season. Come on, keep paying your tithes. I had to put a plug in there for the tithers. Keep paying your tithes because you got a next season coming. And God says if you're faithful in this season, in the next season, I'll open up the windows of heaven. I wish I had somebody that said, Pastor Linda, I'm living in that season right now. Last season, it was hard for me to be faithful in my tithes. Last season, my car broke down and my washer and dryer went out, but I stayed faithful in my giving. And now I'm living in a new season. Do I have any new season folk up in here? Look at somebody and tell them, I'm sowing for my next season. But not only is waiting, remaining committed to your present assignment while looking forward to your future deliverance. Waiting is having a confident expectation about the future while being content in your present situation. Not just being committed, but being content. Understand, when God sent Noah into the ark, he didn't tell him how long he was going to be in it. God spoke to Noah in Genesis chapter 7 and didn't say anything to him until Genesis chapter 8, verse 15. Noah had to live in the silence of God not talking to him and the uncertainty of not knowing when God would deliver him. And can I help you to understand that that wasn't easy? Because when we read this story, especially those of us who read it as children, it said it rained 40 days and 40 nights. But you need to know that that was not the end of the situation. The Bible says that the flood remained. It continued to rage for another 150 days. That's about 5 months. After even the ark rested on Mount Ararat, it was another 4 months. Somebody said 4 months before he could come out. And then Noah had to wait for the water to diminish. I told you, look, Noah is not on a cruise ship. He's not on a luxury liner. He's on an ark. He's locked up with animals. And for me, it wouldn't have been the lions and the tigers. Y'all, it would have been the rats and the roaches. Come on up in here and talk to me. I'm a project girl, so I know what it's like to live with roaches and rats. And for me, it would have been a hard situation. Not about bears, but about roaches. I don't hear y'all saying nothing. Noah is locked up for 1 year and 10 days with the animals and his family. Can I stop right there and just pull a window here to tell you what it was like for Noah to have to live not only with the animals, but with his family? I don't hear y'all saying nothing. Do you know what it was like to have to, okay, because y'all ain't saying nothing. Bishop and I are empty nesters. and we enjoy living by ourselves. But there was a time when one of our children, I'm not going to say which one, just in case they're listening, had to come back home. And I can't begin to explain to you the discomfort, the frustration. Am I talking to anybody up in here? I understand now why my mama said grown folk ought to have their own place to stay. Because grown folk want to come in when they want to come in. Grown folk don't want to clean up like they should clean up. Grown folk want to eat your food and not make a contribution. I'm just talking about what it was like for Noah to live with the animals and his family. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Don't you know that Noah wanted to get off this ark? I believe that's why when Noah finally did get off the ark, the Bible says Noah got drunk. Y'all ain't gonna want to be real up in here. But some of these things that we're having to live through will make you want to go and take up. Will make you go out on the back porch and take up. Oh, I don't have no real folk up in here. But Noah remained content in the ark until it was time for him to disembark. By now, most of us would have at least been complaining. And many of us would have been cussing and drinking. But Noah remains content. When Psalms 40 says, I waited patiently for the Lord and he inclined to me and heard my cry, you need to understand that that word patiently is critical to that text. That patience is our problem in waiting. Because we're waiting, but we're constantly complaining. We're waiting, but we're cussing folk out while we're waiting. We're waiting, but we're waiting in anger and in bitterness. But the mark of spiritual maturity is to wait patiently. Somebody say, I got to learn how to wait patiently. It's to be content until your change comes. Paul says, I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances are. And when you become mature, you understand that you got to live through some things. Come on, you just got to stay in there with them. You got to live through it and not complain. Shut your mouth and just do what you're supposed to do. Because there's a divine alignment between time and purpose. Y'all remember the story of Joseph, don't you? Joseph had to live out his time in Potiphar's house. He had to wait in prison and be forsaken by those who said they were going to remember him. But he waited, and he waited patiently. And I don't know who needs to hear this out here streaming in with me today, who just happened to swipe by and see me on this feed. You need to learn to wait and wait patiently. Because to exit too soon would mean that you could drown in some hot water. I don't know who I'm talking to this morning, but you got to be sure that you don't come out of some places prematurely. Make sure that you don't step out and get a divorce without hearing from the Lord. Make sure that you don't quit the job prematurely. I don't know who needs to hear this prophetic word, but you need to wait. Somebody said 18. And Noah knew that the covenant with God was something he could count on. But he also knew, Dr. Stewart, that it wasn't going to be on water. Because man is not an aquatic being, he's a terrestrial being. And I'm saying that to tell somebody that Noah understood that I'm going to reach dry ground because I know what God has designed me to be. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but whatever you're in that you're having to be content through, just know that it's temporary if it's not where God designed you to be. Come here, somebody, because broke ain't where I'm designed to be. I don't know who I'm talking to. Starving ain't where I'm designed to be. I'm not intended to live on water. God said he will plant my feet on dry ground. Hallelujah up in here. Look at somebody and tell them it's only temporary. Because I know what I was designed to be. Noah, as I get ready to close, Noah was content in his present condition. Somebody say, I got to be content. Yet, he had a confident expectation in his future. When the psalmist says in Psalms 40, I waited patiently on the Lord, the Hebrew word the psalmist uses for wait means to look for, to hope, to expect. In Genesis 6:16, as God was giving Noah instructions for building the ark, y'all, he told him to build a window. That blew my mind. With all the intricate instructions that God had given Noah about the gopher wood and the measurements, that he would also tell him to build a window. But can I tell you this morning that the window was not for God to look in, but it was for Noah to look out. Oh, let me close my message when I tell you that as you're living in whatever situation that you're living in, trying to be content and to be committed, you need to make sure that you build a window in your situation, that even when you can't get out, you can still look out. Y'all, it's called hope. Anybody in here got some hope? Hope is waiting in expectation. The psalmist says, I will remain confident in this. What is my this? Unfavorable situations. I will remain confident in this. What is my this? Situations that's tossing me to and fro. I will remain confident in this. When I had to wait from the time I got my diagnosis all the way to November 25th, I had to remain confident that I would see the goodness of the Lord. Who am I talking to up in here? You need to build a window in your situation. I've never liked an office that didn't have windows, because even when I don't go out, I want to be able to look out. And somebody in here, whatever the situation is, that bad relationship, make sure that you got a window. Anybody in here got a window that say, I still believe God and I'm expecting him to turn my situation around? Anybody up in here got some expectations that I still trust God to come and see about me? Hallelujah in this house. Y'all, I'd have gotten happy because I've had many times when I couldn't get out of what I was going through, but I had a window, I had hope, I had expectation that God would come and see about me. Glory to God. Dr. Stewart, Noah opened up his window and sent birds out in expectation of dry ground. Come here and let me talk to you. You need to send some birds out. Hallelujah in this house. He sent birds out. He sent a raven out. He sent a dove out in expectation. What are your birds this morning? Can I tell you what mine is? My birds are the word of God. Hallelujah in this house. That when I'm in something that I can't get out of, when I'm between a rock and a hard place, I open my window and release a bird, and my God shall supply all of my needs according according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. You ought to be releasing your expectation. I know you're under a mask, but you ought to be releasing the word of God. Hallelujah. And we know that all things are working together for the good of those. I'm just releasing my expectations. I don't know who's sick this morning, but he was wounded for my transgressions. He was bruised for your iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. Open up your mouth under your mask and release your expectations. I release it until I find my healing. I release the word until I find my deliverance. I release the word until I'm no longer lonely anymore. I said release the word. I said release the word. God said my word won't return to me void, but it will accomplish that which I sent it for. Hallelujah up in here. Somebody open your mouth and send the word. Release your expectation. God, I believe you can do exceedingly, abundantly, above all. I said above all I can ask or think. And I'm releasing my expectation because I need an above all blessing. I need an exceeding blessing. I said open your mouth. Open your mouth. Release your expectation. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I'm not going to stay out here on this water forever. There's dry ground for my life. I'm talking to somebody. I prophesy to you today. God has not forgotten your labor. He's not forgotten your obedience. God is going to deliver. Somebody shout deliver, 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 deliver my family, deliver, deliver my body, deliver, deliver my career, deliver. I don't hear y'all saying nothing. Open your mouth and prophesy. Prophesy till the bird come back. Prophesy till the word shows up in your life. Prophesy until the word comes back with your blessing. Hallelujah in this house. I'm trying to help somebody. You coming off this ark? I don't know when, and I don't know why. I don't know where, but I do know that you're coming off this ark. Open your mouth and say, I'm coming off this ark. I'm coming off unemployment. I'm coming off my sick bed. I'm coming off these marital problems. I'm coming off depression. I'm coming off anxiety. I'm about to step out on dry ground. I'm about to step out in new territory, new opportunities. Noah was a pioneer of the new world. Anybody know it's about to be your world? Anybody know it's about to be a new world? Hey! I don't care how bad it is. Hallelujah in this house. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy is coming in the morning. Joy is coming after COVID. Joy is coming after the Delta variant. Joy is coming. Release your expectation. We can't go silent right through here. We can't give up our hope in this chaotic time. The people of God, we can't give up our commitment to God just because we're being tossed to and fro Because we're having to endure some inconvenience, some discomfort. We got to maintain our hope that God won't forget us. When I pray for the people in Haiti, I pray for the people in Afghanistan. I said, God, you said in your word that you won't forget about us. Don't forget about the folk over in Haiti. Don't forget your Christians over in Afghanistan. But Lord, don't forget those of us over here in America. Memphis, Tennessee. Holding it down. Keeping the church going. Still praying for the saints. God, don't forget about us. God said, I won't. Just like I remember Noah, I'll remember you. What was Noah's response to what God did? Because he came out the ark. He and his family, the animals, just like God said. What was Noah's response to what God did? It says Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. That should be your response when God delivers. That should be how you react as you're walking off of your ark. Not taking the first plane on vacation. Not missing church so that you could be the first at the restaurant. But your response should be to build an altar. His gratitude and his admiration of God's greatness led him to worship God. Can we just now even worship? Because even if we're not on dry ground, we're in the ark of safety. And God still deserves our worship. God still deserves our gratitude. You ought to be praising God right now, worshiping, saying, Lord, I thank you. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm still in the ark of safety. It's not how I thought it would be, but I'm still in the ark of safety. For those of you who have come out of whatever the situation you're in, you ought to be worshiping, saying, God, I thank you. I know where you brought me from. I know what you brought me through. Lord, I thank you. I worship you in the beauty of holiness. I thank you for your mercy and your grace towards me. That you didn't let me be destroyed. God, but you were faithful. You abounded your grace towards me. That should be our response. That we bless him continually. Oh, give him the best. Noah didn't take a sick animal. He didn't wait till the other animals had repopulated. He gave him the first and the best. And I'm challenging somebody today to give God your first. Make him first in your finances. Make him first in your time. Make him first on your to-do list. Give him the best you have. Not what's left over. Not after you've pleased everybody else, that you drag something before the Lord. Give him your best, because he deserves it. God won't forget you. Let me pray. Father, I thank you now for the word that has gone forth. Bless you that your word has saturated this house. And I pray, oh God, that person who came discouraged this morning, wondering, oh God, do you still have them on your mind? I pray, oh God, that they are uplifted now. And they have the commitment to go on a little further. I pray, oh God, for that person that's streaming in this morning. Facebook, the website, wherever they are, God, that this word has emanated through the annals of the airwaves and found a home in their spirit. I pray, oh God, now that we will go forward from this place, encouraged, strengthened, fortified, and determined. Knowing, oh God, that our labor is not in vain. Knowing that our obedience, oh God, will bring about an outcome. And we thank you for it. I pray for someone who may be in this audience or may be streaming, Father, that's not saved, that they will hear this word and know that salvation is available to them. That just as Noah preached all those years ago, I'm preaching today because grace is available. Salvation is available. I pray, oh God, that they will know that they don't have to be perfect to give their lives to you. All they have to do is confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And you said that they can be saved. For that person that's streaming in, oh God, and they've been checking out Christ Missionary, I pray, oh God, that they will make that decision today, determined in their own lives that they'll be committed to this local body. In the name of Jesus. We thank you for it, and we believe it done in Jesus' name. And the people of God said amen, amen, and amen. I stand as proxy for Pastor Gina Stewart, Dr. Gina Stewart, the Christ Missionary Baptist Church, saying that you can come. Dr. Stewart would love to be your spiritual leader. She would love to be your covering in this season. You need a covering. You need an ark of safety. And I stand this morning giving you the invitation to come. You may not be in this building. You may be watching us virtually, but you can still become a member of this church wherever you may be. If you're watching us and you have not confessed Jesus Christ as Lord, I give you that invitation this morning. Be ye man, woman, boy, or girl. God wants you. He wants your life. He's not caring about your mistakes. He just wants your life. He wants you to be his people. He wants to be your God. You can come. And the people of God said amen.